Hi, I'm Kevin Glass, and I am here on Blogging Heads today with
Ashe Schow.
I'm a managing editor at townhall.com, and Ashe is a commentary staff writer at the Washington Examiner. And today is going to be the first of a series that I'm hosting for Blogging Heads called Rational Actors. It's kind of a play on the economics concept. In much of neoclassical economics, people are kind of assumed to be rational and to maximize their utility or their welfare or whatever. And a lot of behaviorist economics has kind of thrown that into question, questioning a lot of the assumptions of some of the neoclassicists. And on this show, we're going to be acting rational, but hopefully aware of our biases and trying to counter them. And what I want to do is bring on a whole host of guests, both left and right, policy analysts, journalists, things like that, and talk about some of the issues of the day and try and challenge them on some of their long-held beliefs. So today we have Ashe, and we're going to be talking about a couple different topics. But first, I think I wanted to start with immigration, which is a topic that Ashe has written about, and a lot of her colleagues have written about as well for the Examiner. The comprehensive immigration bill passed the Senate last week, and President Obama has recently encouraged the House to take up the Senate-passed bill, which a lot of the Republican leadership has basically said no. Not a chance. And the plan is, at least that what John Boehner has said, is for the House to do kind of a piecemeal approach. But I wanted to kind of get into some of the background issues that have a lot of Republicans kind of at each other's throats at this point. Marco Rubio, who was kind of the Republican face of the Senate immigration bill, was attacked pretty viciously by a lot of conservatives and thrown under the bus by a lot of people who used to tout him as kind of the next Republican hope. And one of the things that came out recently was the Cbo Report on the immigration bill's consequences. And what conservatives kind of split along partisan lines was, what is the Comprehensive Immigration Reform Bill about? Because the CBO score said the Senate bill would grow the economy pretty massively over the next 10 years, but it also said it would do very little to actually stem the tide of illegal immigration from Mexico. Something along the lines of, we'd get a 25% drop with all of the border security measures. So, Ashe, what I wanted to ask you is kind of, what's your sense of the conservative movement's division on this, and why has it become so stark in recent weeks?
Well, I think that a lot of conservatives are, they're a little wary of a lot of issues with this bill, not just the substance of the bill, but also the fact that it's a 1,200-page bill. It's, kind of like, there's a lot of similarities between Obamacare, where it was negotiated behind closed doors. It's such a long bill. It's got all these different parts, and they're just kind of weary that we're going to have to pass it to find out what's in it, which, heralds back to issues of 2010. And it's not even just conservatives, but it's just kind of voters too, who are just, they're not really trusting of government to do everything massively, especially when they gave them the bill. They gave the senators the bill on a Friday afternoon. There was massive changes to it with the Corker-Hoven amendment. It was not just 100 and couple pages long. It was actually many, many changes throughout the entire bill. They got it on a Friday afternoon. They had their first vote on it on Monday. They had their final vote on it on Thursday. And that's 1,200 pages in less than a week to read. And so we know that they didn't read and comprehend it all. And so we're getting this bill that we don't know what's in it. There wasn't, enough time to debate the new version. And it's just, we have these issues like this that we just don't know what's in it. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know whether we're really, really going to get the border security that it claims to. There's one part of the bill that says that the Secretary Napolitano has the ability to veto the plan for the fence. There's another part of the bill that makes it seem as though the fence can't be built until she signs off on it. But we know that she already believes that we have enough fence and that we have enough border security. So giving her the authority to oversee that is kind of like, how are we going to get it if someone believes that we already have it? So they're weary on the border security. As far as amnesty goes, it's hard to say. A lot of conservatives don't want to give out amnesty. We would rather reform the legal immigration process rather than just a blanket amnesty, because then again we're thinking back to 1986. We got all that amnesty. We were promised that we weren't going to have to do this again, and then 25 years later we have to do it again, which this bill pretty much sets up that in another 25 years we're going to have to do this exact same thing again.
Right. Now, I think that the Obamacare analogy is an interesting one. The Corker-Hoven Amendment, like you said, kind of dropped and was voted on in a very short period of time. Even though, just from my reading of the amendment, it was more friendly to conservatives in general than the original proposal. But right. The rush to pass it was certainly troubling. I was mostly on vacation, but I didn't get a real chance to read it through until long after it had passed. But I think that on the amnesty point, like I said, that kind of sets up the divide between what is the goal of an immigration reform bill. And to a lot on the left, I think that amnesty, well, I won't say amnesty, but let's say making legitimate the kind of incredibly large illegal immigration population that we have in the United States is a goal in and of itself, kind of dealing with the problem of tens of millions of people being in the United States illegally, and either, beginning a process to bring them into American civil society, or at least kind of helping that along, getting at least a portion of the population legitimized is a goal in and of itself, whereas conservatives see that as kind of an unfortunate reality that we have to deal with, but largely a side issue to both border security and legal immigration reform. And I think that Senator Rubio and Senator Flake and some of the conservative supporters of immigration reform in general do kind of take that that goal of the left that they say, legitimizing the illegal population here is something that we need to do no matter what else happens in the bill. And I think that that's kind of illegitimate to conservatives. Am I correct in that?
Somewhat, but it is, like you said, a harsh reality that we understand that we can't up and deport 11 million people and kick them out of the country. So many of these people have jobs and are contributing to society, and, they do have the family ties, and they've been here for so long that it's really difficult. Whereas if we could make it easier for them to become legal citizens, I wouldn't say jump them to the front of the line. I don't think that that's fair, because you think about, the legal immigrants who have come here and have spent so much money on lawyers and the process and years waiting and jumping through hoops, all the paperwork to find out that if they had just come here illegally, they could have it is a balancing act, and I don't think anybody has really figured out the plan on that, or even come up with a good idea of what a plan might look like. I mean, I certainly don't know, what we do with the 11 million that are already here. I mean, we can't get rid of them. We shouldn't get rid of them, but we can't allow them to continue breaking the law, So, I mean, it's difficult. I mean, and no one's really come up with an idea.
So the word amnesty is thrown around a lot, and it has been thrown around a lot. This is something that I'm not sure, So a lot of the kind of really hardline conservative advocates against the bill have basically said that the bill is amnesty. To me, I'm not quite sure what the definition of that is. Is anything that provides a fairly quick path to legal status, does that count as amnesty? Because the bill does have fairly significant penalties for a lot of the illegal immigrants in order to get on the path to legalization, even though in a relatively short time they are granted kind of a semi-permanent legal status here. So I think that conservatives have been pretty hardline about trying to portray the bill as amnesty, but I'm not sure exactly what not amnesty would look like,
Right, and I think, and that is a difficult question. I think that you're right that it's been thrown around so much. I think that at least the perception of this bill, again, not having so much time to read it and truly analyze it, kind of makes it difficult to find out. I mean, not everyone knows what those penalties are. And again, if, Secretary Napolitano has the authority over those penalties, then, I mean, the Obama administration has already said that we're not going to deport nonviolent illegal immigrants. So, having that, if they're just going to go around the law and do what they want, then how do we know those penalties will be enforced?
Right. Now, here's a question, and I just want to kind of gauge your feeling on what the House is going to do now, because they've all said, they're going to take the immigration bill as piecemeal. And obviously, the House has hewed a lot more strictly to their constituency, which are, kind of more grassroots conservatives in America. What path do you think that the House could take on this right now that would satisfy conservative activists?
I think the piecemeal approach would really, really help. And, they're talking about that they want immigration passed before the August recess. And I don't think that's smart, because we really need to debate this. We need to debate all the different parts: legal immigration, the amnesty portion, and border security. So we need to have 3 different debates, full debates. The American people deserve that. They deserve an honest debate. They deserve to know everything that's in the bill that's going to be passed, that's going to affect them. So the piecemeal approach is great. And we even had last week Nancy Pelosi saying that if that's how they do it, she would be open to that as long as it gets immigration passed, Yeah. So, sorry. So, hopefully they do the piecemeal approach. We've never really seen this happen in the past. I would believe that they might do it in pieces, but then put it all together. But again, if we get the debate on all the different sections, I would be a lot happier.
All right. And you mentioned kind of reform of the legal immigration process in addition to reform of the illegal immigration problem, whatever. What could conservatives do kind of to placate their own base on legal immigration reform.
Well, I mean, that one's difficult too. There's, we want, good people who want to come to this country. We want them here. Now, you've got the other, one side saying, and it's not a liberal or conservative saying that, they're going to come here and take jobs from people who are already here. Well, again, we want good people, and, we want the scientists and doctors and everyone that wants to come over here and open up a business, to have that opportunity. And we want to make sure that we do get the best and brightest and those who love this country and want to be a part of it. So I think that people that are against that just kind of need to accept that there are great people all over this world, not just in America, and we want all the best people here in America, I mean, everyone kind of agrees that this is the best country in the world, and we want to make sure it stays that way and is the best place for people to come.
I'm not sure that everyone agrees that this is the best country in the world, but I think that a lot of
right.
A lot of Americans would agree.
Right.
Yeah, the kind of reforming the legal immigration process and attracting what we would call high skills immigrants is something that both Republicans and Democrats have rhetorically agreed on for a long time, but haven't ever actually come together to pass anything, partially because I think they both want to use it as a stick or a carrot to attach to other pieces of legislation for, in order to say, this is, the high skills legal immigration bill that you've always wanted, so also vote for this other part of the legislation that we've attached to it. And that's happened multiple times over the past few years. Most recently, I believe, in December of last year, there was a short-lived high skills immigration debate in the Senate that died quickly, basically because they couldn't come to an agreement on what else to attach to a high skills immigration, or an expansion of legal high skills immigration.
Right. And so if the House takes this up in piecemeal approach, then hopefully that will get taken care of, because it really does deserve its own debate, and, it really doesn't deserve to be the carrot on the stick. That's a really, really important issue that it's not fair that people who want to come to this country are being denied that just so that, Democrats can have a talking point or Republicans can have a talking point and that Obama can give a speech. It's really just not fair.
Well, specifically I believe what happened last time was Republicans wanted to expand high skills immigration by limiting what are called diversity visas, which are basically a form of low skills immigration from impoverished countries around the world, and Democrats didn't want to go for that. Democrats, I believe, want to keep the total number of diversity visas constant while expanding the high skills immigration. So they kind of came to an impasse on that the last time. I'm not sure if that's going to be solved this time around. But obviously, in the House, there's no filibuster, and Republicans don't really have to hew to anything the Democrats want. Moving on, though, I wanted to talk with you about I guess I would call it a phenomenon in Texas, where I would say it was kind of an astonishing show of activism last week when State Senator Wendy Davis filibustered a pro-life bill and had actually throngs of pro-choice activists flood the state capitol and kind of disrupt the whole process. And whether or not you think that was a good thing, I would say it is kind of an astonishing show of enthusiasm on the part of activists. But after that happened, Texas Governor Rick Perry called a special session this week to reconsider the same legislation that got kind of overwhelmed last week. I wanted to kind of get your take on I don't know if we want to call it democratic activism, but certainly the involvement in state legislative politics that has been fairly popular over the last few years. And if you think that this is a legitimate show of democracy in action, which a lot of progressives have kind of termed it as, or just an outrageous, trampling of the legislative process.
Well, I believe that she stood up for what she believes in, and so I do think that it was a tremendous show of democracy. I mean, you look at how conservatives responded to Rand Paul's filibuster, I mean, they're following the legislative process, and that is a good thing. But I do not agree with her position. I mean, the bill banned abortions after 20 weeks, which is 5 months into the pregnancy, and you kind of see it's kind of an issue that everybody keeps saying 20 weeks when we really should be saying 5 months, because that really, really shows that it's into the second trimester, which poll after poll shows that even abortion supporters do not support second trimester abortions by large majority, 60-something%. And even in Texas, there was a Texas University, or a University of Texas poll, I believe, that showed about 62% favored the prohibition of post-20-week abortions, with 47% strongly favoring this bill, versus only about 22% strongly opposing it. So on the one hand, it's good the process worked. She followed the law. She did. It took a tremendous amount of courage to stand up for 11 hours. I believe their rules were that she couldn't even have hard candy or anything to keep her going.
The Texas rules are pretty strict.
So it took a tremendous amount of willpower for that. But again, what she's arguing for is something that is in modern civilization pretty reprehensible, which is killing a baby at 5 months in the pregnancy. I mean, you see on an ultrasound, they already have fingers and toes, and they can feel. Some scientists say they can feel. I think the left has some scientists that say they can't, or that it's difficult to judge. But Kirsten Powers of Daily Beast was talking about this, and she's gone on a pretty big rant recently. She wrote a column today that was, quoting from, one of those Mommy and Me websites, saying that the baby is at 25 weeks, is, moving around in there and kind of grasping around inside the uterus, and to say that that's not a person yet, and that's not a viable baby, when babies survive at 20 weeks, at 25 weeks, and you can go look up pictures of what they look like. They've got all their fingers and toes and eyes, and they just look like tiny little babies. So, I mean, what she's arguing for is killing that. And this bill had exemptions for, I believe, rape and incest, definitely health of the mother, and some pretty strong health problems for the baby itself. Whereas if it were going to be born with severe disabilities that were going to cause it pain and a short life, then that would still be okay. But Wendy Davis blocked that, and what a lot of liberal activists do is just anytime you bring up abortion, they cry war on women and women's rights, and that it's somehow a woman's right to kill another living being, and we should all commend women who want to do this, when it's really horrible. It's really reprehensible to think of this.
I think that one of the questions that doesn't really get addressed in the debate, because I don't think anyone's really comfortable answering the question, is at what point does a child in the womb entitled to protection of life, entitled to human rights, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't think even conservatives really want to make a lot of those arguments. Like you just mentioned, that one of the primary arguments that conservatives have been making in the wake of Wendy Davis's filibuster last week is polling numbers. You know, that even a lot of pro-choicers don't support second trimester abortions. And actually, Ross Douthat had a great column yesterday, kind of saying that the gun control debate in the wake of Newtown and the abortion debate in the wake of Kermit Gosnell's atrocities have kind of come down on similar lines, in that you know, polling numbers overwhelmingly support one position or the other. You know, polling numbers were pretty heavily in favor of gun control after Newtown, and polling numbers are pretty heavily against you know, late trimester, even mid-trimester abortions. But I don't think that this necessarily should be about polling numbers. It should be more about the, you know, autonomy of a woman versus the rights protection of a developing child.
Right, and well, back on those gun control polling numbers, weren't they that the American people support background checks, which, I mean, we already have. It's another one of those polling issues where, would you support this, but they don't mention any of the negatives that are in it, you know, like who doesn't support background checks, but with all the other things in that bill. So that one was a little difficult, considering all that was left out of the polling. You know, do you believe in a national gun registry, letting the government with the NSA stuff, you know, kind of like, do you really want the government to have this information on you? And also with, you know, they didn't really ask if people approved of doctors asking you if you had a gun at home was one of Obama's executive actions. That was a little ludicrous. But back to Gosnell, another thing that the Texas bill had would be similar to the post-Gosnell Pennsylvania bill, which would basically regulate abortion clinics like other clinics and surgeons' offices, which is really frightening to think that they aren't in many places regulated that way. When you think women's rights, like, doesn't a woman have the right to clean, safe medical treatment? I mean, why aren't we bringing that up? I mean, I'm sorry. An abortion is a very, very dangerous procedure, so shouldn't that be done in the cleanest and safest of places? And the Texas abortion bill, you know, all the opponents on the pro-abortion crowd is saying that this is going to shut down most of the abortion clinics, which, you know, has been pointed out that they said the same thing about post-Gosnell abortion clinic regulations up in Pennsylvania. And you know how many abortion clinics shut down? Like 5. A few is what happened. So they do this apocalyptic like view that all the abortion clinics are going to shut down in the state of Texas, or, you know, the majority of them, when it's just not true. I mean, a few might shut down, but the majority of them are still going to be allowed to operate, and they'll be able to operate cleaner and safer.
Right. So I'm not a medical doctor, obviously. I know the progressive argument is that, you know, an abortion clinic isn't a hospital, and an abortion is not the same as, you know, other surgical procedures. Not that again, I don't know if this is true, but it's about balancing kind of the safety and precautions that one would take in a hospital with access to abortion, which I really think that access to abortion is what progressives are principally concerned with here. So
right.
Even if, you know, the safety standards are lower, they're in favor of, you know, more access. So, you know, even...
Which is an argument we should be making, that, hey, they don't actually care about the woman. They just care about killing babies. Because if you would sacrifice safety just to end a pregnancy, then I mean, again, that's kind of scary. I mean, that's really scary. Can we imagine that in like the general medical community, to sacrifice clean environments just so that we could get whatever procedure we wanted? I mean, especially if this is especially if it's an elective abortion. Would you, I mean, if you're getting plastic surgery, let's say, would you give up a clean environment just to get a nose job? I mean, it's just kind of like, how much safety and cleanliness are we want to give up? Have you seen pictures and video of an abortion? If you've seen diagrams of what they do with the vacuum, with the tongs, with the pieces, this is not something that you want done in a third world clinic or a back alley. Like, this is an incredibly dangerous, incredibly painful, incredibly frightening procedure, intimate procedure that should not be done in a dirty environment. And that's, I mean, like, that's the thing with Gosnell, is how open to infection are you with this procedure? And you don't want it done in a dirty environment. And conservatives really should be, at the very least, arguing that, you know? I mean, let's even give up a little bit of the anti-abortion and just right now be arguing for cleanliness, safety.
I think that's certainly a legitimate tactic that a lot of conservatives have been taking in the wake of Gosnell, and I think that might be the best way to kind of frame a lot of these laws. I don't think that it's quite fair to say that pro-choice activists don't care about women. I would want to take kind of the best view of people that I disagree with, right? So I do think that pro-choice activists legitimately do care about women, but they might be wrong about that, right? For all of the reasons that you just stated.
Right.
Moving on, I think that there's one last topic we want to touch on, and you've done a lot of writing about this, is the Farm Bill, which was failed reauthorization. The House, was it last week or end of the week before that?
I believe it was the week before.
The week before, the House of Representatives failed to reauthorize the Farm Bill, which to a lot of conservatives is heartening, because the Farm Bill has been a mess for so very long. But to a certain extent not surprising, because it's been rare that the Farm Bill has been reauthorized kind of in a clean and easy process over the last, 25, 30 years.
Right.
But the Farm Bill is kind of one of those pieces of legislation. It comes up every 5 years. Conservatives hate it. It's massively filled with pork. It's really terrible policy that raises the price of food for basically everyone in the United States. And at its heart, it's just a welfare bill with some agricultural policy attached to it. And the welfare part is the Supplemental Nutrition Access Program, which is food stamps. But why don't you tell me a little bit about why conservatives might be heartened to think that this time is different and that there can be real change on the Farm Bill process?
Well, we have to answer that. We have to step back that the Farm Bill and along with the Transportation Bill are both things that people can't really get ginned up about. You know, I mean, we talk Obamacare and people go wild. But when you bring up farm policy, they kind of go to sleep. And that's kind of how Congress has gotten away with this for so many years. But now that you have organizations like Freedom Works and Heritage Action that will point out the issues in these bills, people are starting to actually pay attention. And that is why there's so much animosity towards them now, and why it's so difficult to get them passed, because people are starting to learn what's in them. They're starting to care. They're starting to realize that this does affect me, that the Farm Bill is not just farmers in Midwest that we don't know. And it's, they're starting to learn that 80% of it is food stamps and the rest of it is pretty much corporate welfare. I mean, this is just a total welfare bill, whether it's welfare as food stamps, welfare for corporations, because they talk about, the farm subsidies that we need to give these farmers. Well, the subsidies overwhelmingly go to the big farms, the corporate farms, the Tysons and, the farms that produce chickens for KFC type corporations. This isn't going to mom and pop farms. And the other issue with these subsidies is that we're essentially guaranteeing a profit for farmers whether they produce a product or not. I mean, there was a quote a couple years ago when I was writing about this. There was a farmer who said he can plant seeds in soil that he knows isn't going to produce anything, and he'll still make like $1,000 a square foot because the government's just guaranteed that. Because they guarantee up to, in the recent farm bill where they redid direct payments, they essentially guarantee about 90 to 95% profit whether you produce anything or not based on the previous year's average crop price. So, and crop prices right now are at an all-time high. Like, they are far above the average of the past 10, 20 years, where we're guaranteeing farmers to stay at this level when there's no guarantee that crop prices are going to stay at this level. And if they normalize, then what happens when farmers start losing that guarantee? Then the big corporations and their lobbyists will come to Washington even further, and then we're going to have this crisis that, oh my God, the farmers are not making enough money. They're taking a hit. We need to do something. We need to save them. And just like any disaster relief bill, we suddenly have to pass this farm disaster bill. Like we had the drought disaster bill that because there was a drought, we had to save the farmers. And I understand the process behind that. But if you think about any other business, they have to account for their own risk where, we provide the farmers this insurance that guarantees them this, when in other businesses, can you imagine if during the bank crisis or before the bank crisis, we were arguing for this type of insurance for bankers that, oh, God forbid that some sort of hardship befalls the bankers. We need to guarantee their profits. Do you think anybody would go for that? But because, for some reason, for farmers, it's totally different. Right. Any other business wouldn't get this kind of guarantee, but because it's the farmers, they do, and then that allows them to produce less crop because they have an incentive to sit back and not grow and still collect their money, which then leads to food prices going up for everyone. And then if we want to talk about the food stamp side, of course, the Obama administration waiving the welfare work requirements from 1996, which resulted in 2.8 million people getting off the welfare doles, resulted in the lowest number of child poverty in decades in the U.S. We gave that up. This farm bill, there was an amendment by, I believe, Tim Heelskamp, introduced an amendment that would have restored those, and that amendment did not pass. But interesting, more conservatives voted for his amendment than voted for the farm bill itself. So, I mean, the big issue now, and what has been alluded to, what is a possibility, what I'm fighting for, is to split food stamps from farm bill, which some people say that, or I've heard from some offices that that would remove the talking point of, oh, we voted against the farm bill just because of the food stamp portion. Well, then your talking point becomes, now we're moving on to corporate welfare, and we're going to reform corporate welfare for farm subsidies. So you have two distinct policies that need to be debated on their own, because you had some in the House voting against the increased welfare, some voting, or that they didn't cut welfare the food stamp program enough. You had others voting against the bill because they believed they cut it too much. You had still others voting against the bill because of the corporate farm subsidies. So you had all these different reasons to vote against the bill, where if you were to split it, then you might be able to get people who voted against the food stamp portion to vote for the farm subsidy portion, vice versa, and so it just becomes another more transparent form of government, allowing people to really understand all that's being talked about instead of having these comprehensive bills that people don't understand. This was it was like $1 trillion food stamp bill, $1 trillion farm policy, and Americans are really weary of $1 trillion bills now. I mean, Obamacare really set the stage to discourage this kind of thing, and Congress is continuing to do it, hoping that it flies under the radar.
I think that goes back to what we were saying earlier about kind of carrots that incentivize people to vote for bills that they don't necessarily want, and I think that the Farm Bill is a really good example of that, is that food stamps, I think, for all the kind of conservative disagreement with how the food stamp program is run, in general aren't all that opposed to the idea behind food stamps, which is that we give kind of food assistance to people who are really impoverished, who really need it.
Right.
And conservatives aren't opposed to that in theory, largely aren't opposed to that in the actual way that it's run, and separating out those two bills. If you had a food stamp only bill, I think you would actually see it pass with a lot of Republican support, and that a lot of Republicans' disagreements with the Farm Bill are on the corporate welfare side of things that you were talking about, rather than on the food stamp side. Although, a lot of conservatives have said they have had problems with food stamps in recent years.
Right. Well, I mean, and they don't want to end the food stamp program. They want to ensure that 80% of $1 trillion bill is not being spent on it, because we can see that handouts like this are not working when there are those who truly need it and only need it for a short amount of time. That we need to reform the process to ensure that everybody just use it for a short amount of time, rather than allowing people to sit on food stamps for 10 years, because you have these stories where you are at the grocery store and the person ahead of you is talking on their smartphone, is, pulling out their iPad, and then they're using food stamps to buy junk food. And it's, you have other stories where you'll see people at Walmart where they'll be, have a whole rack of, PS3 games and Xbox 360 games, and then they'll take out their EBT card to buy their food, when it's just kind of a little ridiculous that we're just allowing people to live a different lifestyle.
I don't think that that's entirely fair. You do see...
It's not a large portion. It is definitely not a large portion.
I mean, that's kind of
when we do have stories like that.
That's kind of the argument that conservatives made in the 90s, like the quote-unquote welfare queen stereotype that they came up with. And for the most part, I don't think that people who are on food stamps are in that kind of a situation where they have expensive electronics in addition to their food stamps. But I think that that's why a lot of conservatives aren't against the food stamp program in theory, is that, for the most part, it does help people who do need it. There is waste, and there is fraud, and there is abuse. But that's kind of par for the course with any government program, I think that we would say at this point.
Right.
Anyway, I think that we should probably wrap up, but this has been a really great discussion. Thanks for being on with me, Ash.
Thanks for having me.
And hopefully I'll catch you again another time.
All right.
Thanks a lot.